Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Art Giser, guaranteed to be a font of creativity and wisdom to come. He is the creator of Energetic NLP. His superpower is opening other people's superpowers by clearing subconscious, spiritual, and energetic blocks to success and happiness. Transformation, he says, can be easy and fun. I'll go for that. He's got a degree from University of California in biology, and he is an NLP trainer, he is a graduate from the Center of Advanced Studies for NLP. He is a trainer in Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Diverse background, 39 years using NLP in his services, consulted with major corporations, and has used this technique and his work to really benefit thousands of lives to date. Art, glad to have you here. Oh, another thing. He has a chapter in a book called The Untold Secret of My Transformation. And I'll have that in a link underneath the video. Great to have you here, Art.
Oh, great to be here.
So in your initial engagement in life and youth, how did you first encounter the notion that there was something more inside that was reflected in the outer world? Or did you have an experience? Did you have a notion? Was it just an inkling, an intuitive moment? How did that occur?
It's a great question. I know I was really young. I'm not sure when, but somehow I knew that there were all these powers in the unconscious mind. I knew things like ESP were real. In fact, I don't know exactly how old I was. I was in elementary school, and I wanted to check out a book on hypnosis from the library. And the librarian wouldn't let me check it out because I was a kid. So my mom checked it out for me. And my mom said the librarian gave her one of those "you're a terrible mother" looks. But, and I used to get guys, friends and cousins and stuff. So I just knew there was all this more to reality. Again, the powers of the unconscious mind and the energetic spiritual realm was just real to me.
Sure. And as a curious kid, we often find interests into those worlds in kind of a happenstance kind of way, not knowing that any better and just being curious, right?
Actually, a comic book helped me. They used to sell these, have ads for it. It was called the Hypno Eye. And it was a picture with plastic in front. When he moved it, it had a like a spiral that would twirl.
Kind of like the magic eye that Charles Tart developed.
Probably, yeah, probably very much.
So okay.
I guess my parents ordered it for me because I wasn't old enough, but of course you don't really need one, but it was a fun way to start.
Well, yeah, and being able to shift your vision, it's like instead of looking, you gaze.
Mm-hmm.
There's a distinction that we don't often realize because we're often looking for things and missing them because we're looking too hard and they're right in front of us. Mm-hmm. So as you were developing, were there moments where, you mentioned telepathy, and I think I heard you say psychokinesis, but did you have any moments where those kinds of abilities kind of went, oh, here's something you can do, by the curious and inquisitive childlike nature that you might have had toward it?
Well, there were times, and everybody's had these experiences where I just knew things, and I look back on it, there was no way I could have known what I knew at the time. I don't think I thought that much about it until I was in college and started having a lot of spontaneous experiences, but I didn't know what to do with them, and I didn't like them.
Yeah, I can relate. I had a number of them myself. I rather enjoyed them though, because it gave me an opportunity to really explore what's inside in the inner worlds and things like that. I kind of got prepared a little younger. I had some initial experiences with out-of-body events, and then having nightly trips to an orange cigar-shaped cloud from the time I was 8 to 10. I'd literally watch my physical body go through that process and then merge with it just as we entered the
Wow.
cloud. And I wake up in bed the next morning, couldn't wait to go back. Right. And then fast forward to, I was 23, getting ready to move to Phoenix, and I was walking through a bookstore in Muncie, Indiana, and books fell off the shelf in front of me. Go figure, right? That never happens. Nobody else around. And I walk over and pick it up, and the front cover, it says Strangers Among Us. It was by Ruth Montgomery. It's published in 1970. It was 1980.
You know the name. Yeah.
Right. And so I turn it over where it had fallen open on the floor, and the first paragraph I get, my eyes get directed towards says, paraphrased, the most common UFO contactee in the Midwest during the late 50s and early 60s was the orange cigar-shaped cloud. Now that threw me for a loop because I had never considered it.
Wow.
And that led to a lot of other curious notions. So
when I was very young, I would, as soon as the lights were out, I wouldn't be asleep. I mean, as soon as the lights went out, it'd be like showtime, being like an IMAX theater.
Yeah.
There was these realities that had people and animals and stuff, and they had very consistent physical laws, but not ours, our physical laws.
Sure.
And I still don't know what I was seeing, but actually,
if you did know, though, let's pose this curious question. If you did know, what might they have been?
I think they were kind of a bleed through from some other planes of reality and my mind interpreting them in a certain way. I don't think they were literally correct, but I think things were bleeding through and my mind was interpreting them.
Sure. Yeah, we interpret things based on the knowledge base that we have at the time.
Right.
We'd had a brief exchange, and you'd mentioned the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm that you found interesting, that Nepe and Close posited, which does explain mathematically 9 other dimensions of consciousness where consciousness, space, and time are tethered across them. So, that having those kind of experiences now, that gives us kind of a framework to put them in. There's also, I don't know if you're familiar with William Swigard's work back in the 1950s. He had a process called multi-plane awareness. And lo and behold, he actually had a process to take people through those 9 planes of consciousness and integrate your bodies on each one of them. So that, what a novel process that, there's not too many that really go that deep in order to find that kind of information, because doesn't seem to be that many curious seekers yet. Although I think with the advent of this last catastrophic kerfuffle that we've had globally, that it got people to look inside a little bit more. What do you think about that?
Oh, for sure. And I chuckled because one of my teachers was this Philippine psychic healer, amazing guy. He was the president of the Philippine American Psychic Healers. And I tell you stories about him. He was an amazing person. But one time in a class, he had us create sort of like clones of ourselves and station them in different realities, planes of reality. And what was funny about it is I then, a few days later, went to a class with another one of my teachers who was a more Western-based, he was eclectic, everything. And he looks at me funny and he goes, there's like these different slices of you that are doing different things. And I cracked up and I went, that's impressive. And I think there's better ways to do it than the kind of slice thing. But it was very validating that this other teacher.
Oh, yeah. And you never know until, it's like in these conversations, we're validating each other's experience because of our own, and being able to relate like, oh, yeah, this was real because I experienced it too. And now here's a shared reality that's congruent. Whether we use the same terminology, that's okay. However, the basic theme that we're talking about is really consistent about the dynamics of our being in this world and others, apparently.
Yeah. Well, and then when you add in parallel realities, which I've had some pretty interesting experiences with, and so I personally totally believe they're real, in based on my experiences. And So then you have that other, it's not even just these, there's different versions of the different planes of reality. So that gets even more and more interesting.
It's amazing how easily we can explore when we don't put our own bias and belief systems in front of us. It's more of an experience system rather than a belief system. We don't know what can be, so let's explore. Right?
But years ago, I was into already a lot of, I was studying with energy healers and psychic development, but somehow past lives seemed dumb to me, like, oh, that's just an old silly idea. And a friend of mine, I'd never met her husband. I was at, what they used to call it, the Whole Life Expo in San Francisco.
Right. Yeah.
And she goes,
I know the originator, or one of the originators, Paul Andrews.
oh, very cool. I spoke at it once, but
cool. That's a really nice event, especially to be able to speak.
Yeah, it was great. And but I ran into a friend of mine from NLP classes, and she goes, oh, I'd like you to meet my husband. He's actually at this booth and he's doing psychic readings. And, he's really good. You ought to try one. So I thought, sure. And and here I'm thinking past lives are just kind of silly. And the other thing I should add in for the story to make sense is through the NLP, I'd learned a lot about communicating with my unconscious mind and getting answers from the unconscious. So I go, and his name was Phil, and he's giving me this reading, and everything's spot on. Like I said, we'd never met before. And I'm thinking, that's really good. And then he goes, now let's look at past lives. And I thought, oh, I'm not past lives. And I should write in one other fact. When I was like 4 or 5, the earliest birthday I remember, 2 different people gave me these sets of little toy knights. And I don't know if they coordinated because they were the same kind. And they were my favorite toys for years. And my full name is Arthur. And
so you were knighted early.
Yeah, and people used to sometimes go, there was a knight-like quality about me, the way I stood and defending the weak, and and they go, you have this whole knight thing going on. And so this guy's reading me, and then he talks about past lives, and he goes, you were a knight. My whole body stiffened. And I asked my unconscious, I go, is this true? And I heard, yes. So, who knows? But it was like a pretty interesting thing to bring up after, so many times people have brought up being a knight to me. So,
it's funny you mentioned that. My wife, who's originally from St. Petersburg, Russia, one of her past life visions, she was a knight as well. And she just saw herself, it was preparing for battle, I guess it was, and kind of going through some moves and, full armor, just really feeling almost just exhausted, and yet still having to prepare to take on the next one. And I found that interesting. And I've only had one. I had the same kind of notion that you did, what's it really matter to begin with? And then I had the opportunity to experience one. My choice was to experience the one most significant to this life.
Oh, great.
And so it was kind of bizarre, though. I saw myself and my son in this life walk through. We had leather tunics on, and the leather, inch or so banded sandal kind of things that wrapped up to the knees almost, walking through a jungle. Then the next scene, we were building a flat top pyramid metropolis in the middle of this jungle. And then the next scene, we're done. There's a celebration. I'm sitting in this large wooden, ornately carved chair. And then the next scene, I'm in a room with a screen that comes on, and my father is addressing me, and he says, you need to evacuate everybody as soon as possible. The next scene, I see all these ships flying around, evacuating people, kind of an organized chaos, if you will. And in the next scene, I see this wall of water come through and wipe out everything. And then the last scene, I'm up in a cave at the top of some stairs, water lapping at the stairs. I don't know how far down the stairs went. And in that Chase lounge, I look like I'm in my mid-30s, very, pristine physically. And then I went into the body and I was like so tired. And I closed my eyes and I see these 4 points of light close to me and one off in the distance. And
Wow.
I look at the one off in the distance and I leave.
Wow.
And then in that, a couple of weeks later, full moon, I was taking a walk up the Phoenix Mountain Preserve trail that I live next to. And I turned to look down through the valley, and off in the distance, I see the same silhouette of the mountains that I saw in the vision.
Oh, no kidding.
And
Wow.
everything just kind of went, oh, wait a minute. And, you know, when we, so in the soil, what's the word I want to use? Layering in the valley here, about 6 to 8 feet down-ish, sometimes a little deeper, there's a layer of caliche, which is really fine silt that's been compressed into clay. Well, how does that happen? Ocean bottom.
Right, right.
So, you know, and we're in Phoenix, right? So
Right.
could it be coming part of that legend where, you know, where the society is going to crash and burn and rise again, beginning in Phoenix? I don't know. But it's an interesting thing to consider, especially with my background and experience that you've, you know, at least got a little bit of insight from. And there seems to be many like yourself that you have this inner, let me ask you this question. In that inner place, is there a driving energy, a driving intention that you have had that is unquenchable?
You mean in general?
Yeah, and like, so the reason I'm asking
Yeah.
in my world, right, that I've created, there's an opportunity that's emerging that is coordinating our inner and outer balance, and that our inner being is emerging into its destined or designed form, fit, and function in the world. Because we've been avoiding that, right? This is the layering effect of all of the work we've done in the past to get where we are now in order to fulfill something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I would definitely agree. I mean, definitely I'll tell people, I'm not generally very ambitious, like, you know, most of the way people would use that term, but I'm spiritually ambitious. It's always like, you know, what's the next level? What's the next level? How do I develop more? How do I help more people? So, yeah, I mean,
well, and that's really what it's all about, is those that we can help. It doesn't matter unless we're of service. That's really where the flow, it seems, manifests fully, is in that process. What kinds of synchronistic types of events that have you noticed that in that desire to serve that have come up for you in those moments, whether it be in individual clients or even better, working with some of the major corporations that you've worked with? Have there been those moments?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in the Energetic NLP programs that I teach, one of the goals we always have is to have more and more delightful synchronicities. And my life is ridiculously synchronistic. I mean, one recent event, I was working in London in May, and I was talking to a good friend of mine. We were about to take a walk through Greenwich Park, which has some really old trees with amazing energies in it. And I was talking about another friend who lives in this town outside of London. And I go, in her part of town, all the streets are named after butterflies. And one of the streets was Red Admiral Street, which is a butterfly that I think used to be very common in England, but isn't as common anymore. And we're walking, and I went, you know, I've never seen a Red Admiral butterfly. I don't know what they look like. 30 seconds later, when it lands like 2 feet away from me, we're taking pictures of him. We startle him. He flies off, and he comes right back to that same spot. But even funnier, I was teaching a program in London called Spiritual Alchemy, and it's not the traditional approach to spiritual alchemy. And I had spoken to this NLP conference, and then I needed to take an Uber out to my friends where I was going to stay for a while. And I hadn't taught this spiritual alchemy program yet. And the first Uber came, and I realized I put the address in wrong. And I realized he didn't really want to go to that part of London. And I went, hey, that's fine. I'll tip you. Just cancel it. That's my mistake. I get a different driver. So the next driver I get, and it's over an hour ride. We start getting into Kabbalah and all these things, and really an interesting young guy from the Ivory Coast who lived in France, and I was in the UK. And right before he drops me off, he goes, yes, my grandmother told me I should study spiritual alchemy. And I just started laughing, and I handed him a flyer, and I go, and it was a holiday weekend in the UK, and he had kids, and I go, you probably can't make it, but if you can, come as my guest. And he wasn't able to make it, but I thought, of all the things to say to me, it was like.
Now, do you find that these kind of events happen in a plethora of opportunities during every day, and we just miss them? How do you advise others to learn how to recognize those synchronicities and turn them into serendipitous moments?
That's a good question. I mean, some of them are kind of hit you on the head once, but others are pretty subtle.
Well, even so, I know a lot of people that go, that was just, random or coincidence, or, there's not that intimate awareness and connection with reality.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I teach people is getting more in touch with their spiritual guidance and their inner wisdom. So one way is, well, I'll give an example. So, my full name's Arthur. People call me Art. And, Arthur and Art are not common names in the US. I mean, they're not common names in the UK.
True.
And twice I've had it happen where I would just be channel surfing, and I turn on the channel, Arthur, Art, Arthur. I mean, like 9, 10 times.
Somebody trying to get your attention?
Yeah. And so what I do then is I meditate and I go, you got my attention. What's the message? And both of those times it was just, oh, we're just reminding you life is magical. That's all. It's like, that's the message. But so to me, a lot of it is just to get quiet and meditate and ask, is there a message here? And just notice if anything bubbles up. And the trick to it is you have to really ask the question. So what people usually do when they ask their unconscious mind a question is they really want a particular answer. So it's hard to get the correct answer.
When they think about it, their minds are incessant in the thinking. They don't shut up long enough to listen.
Yeah. Often I'll tell people, ask your unconscious, and they go, I'm not getting anything. And I go, you actually have to give it a few seconds.
Right.
And sometimes it's a feeling, sometimes it's image, sometimes it's words. But often I find that if the really strong messages tend to show up in more than one way. So like the way I got into NLP originally. So my field is energetic NLP, where I bring together neuro-linguistic programming, spiritual principles, healing and transformative energy work, and intuition development.
Well, they're all, according to, I had an interview with Dr. Irvin Laszlo, and I was talking to him about quantum physics. And so I flippantly said, yeah, we're 99% space and 1% material. He said, I would say we are 100% energy.
Yes.
And,
exactly.
That just rung a bell in the depth of my being. It's like, yeah, it's true.
Well, the way that I first found out about NLP is I went to a lecture on intuition, and it was just okay. And we had a break, and they had a table selling all these books on intuition. And I went out in the hallway, and for people that are younger, there used to be a thing called flyers and bulletin boards. And so I'm looking at this bulletin board, and it was back in '83. And one of the flyers said Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And when I read the words, it literally felt like a bolt of lightning hit me on top of the head and went straight down the midline of my body, which, as you know, the midline's very significant. And I mean, it was literally like, boom. And so I'm thinking, the scientist in me, because I was a medical researcher at the time went, what was that? The mystic in me goes, well, it was a sign. What do you think it was? But I didn't know what to do with that. And I walked back in the room. I'm a little stunned. And I'm looking at the table of books, and all the books are about intuition except for one book. And that one book was about NLP. And I thought, okay. So naturally, I bought the book, and then everything in my life changed. But and like you mentioned, a book just falling off. There's Shirley MacLaine talks about. I know a few people have had that experience where all of a sudden, for no reason, a book falls at them.
There again, this is the many worlds. I don't think it's a theory. I think it's a reality. There is so much interaction. We only see less than 1% of the visual light spectrum or the electromagnetic spectrum. And in that, there are layers of bandwidths of worlds that are in specific ranges. And this is what Nepe and Close talk about. It's also what William Swigart brought out as a direct experience of not just a theory of everything paper, right? So the funny thing is he found this, and I'm not sure how he discovered the technique, but he developed it in the 50s, and Nepe and Close published their paper in 2010. So it took 6 years for the science to come through those individuals that were looking for it. But like you said, you got to ask the questions. You got to be looking for it, and you got to be real specific with the questions you ask, and then not try to answer them with the knowledge you have.
Right.
So how do you bring this awareness and this ability that perceptively we all have into a cohesive environment that actually gets people who might be stuck in their left brain, or just, let's say, stuck in their thinking, and open them up to the worlds of vibration?
Well, I mean, it's what I do in my programs, but to give some high-level answers that could be helpful for people. I think there's several main components. One is clearing the energetic, unconscious, and spiritual programming that blocks us, because we've been programmed, pretty much every society, every family, programs
the BS, the belief systems.
Programs us not to connect with our inner truth.
Right.
And that's not, sometimes people take that like it's something evil or bad. It's normal. And
it is what it is, right? That the more we criticize or condemn or judge self-deprecatingly, the further away we get from our ability to actually perceive what is true for us.
Well, and I'm
Do you agree with that?
So yes, and like the point I was trying to make is that, like, if you're a parent, you don't want your kids to know if you're afraid, if you're anxious. So with the best of intentions, often parents are putting out these things like, don't see reality, see what we're telling you. And that's what all authority figures do. And again, often it's very well intended, sometimes not. In religion, spiritual groups, teachers, like I say, I was a medical researcher for years, and there's a whole establishment in science about, like, this is what's science and this is what isn't.
Right. Yeah, I started school in the pre-med program.
What?
I started school in the pre-med program.
Yeah, and again, often for the best of intentions, not always, but often. So there's just, from all over, way of programming telling us not to connect with our own truth, or that we're not smart enough, we're not capable, we can't understand it. So one aspect of what I do with people is a ton of clearing of the things that get in the way. Or it can be, you mentioned before, like, certain past lives are very tied into this life. And a lot of the people that study with me have had past lives where they developed their psychic or spiritual abilities and got in trouble. In one way or another, either got burned at the stake.
I have to admit, from my experience at 18 and what happened to me and the sharing of it, there wasn't any listening for it. I was even labeled and drugged at one point because of it. And then in 2010, I was asked to speak at the International Association for Near-Death Studies annual conference. So that was just a huge swing of, from diagnosis to now wanting to hear my story. It was a great honor for me and really gave me a much, better view of myself as a result too,
Oh,
because now that was possible.
yeah. Oh, I mean, a friend of mine who's incredibly psychic and way more than that. I don't know how to describe her. When she was really young, she was at a little sleepover party. And all of a sudden she tells the mother at the house that she goes, my father just died. And the woman's going, no, the things you would say to a kid. And of course, the father had just died, but there was this whole disconnect between, no, what you're perceiving isn't real. So there's that part. Another part is opening up the abilities that people already have. And as you said in your introduction, my superpower is opening up other people's superpowers. The other part I want to mention that most people aren't aware of is permission is actually a very layered and nuanced topic. People think, oh, I have a strong intention for something. So they think there's intention in their mind and energy field for it, permission for it. And very often there isn't. And one of the weaknesses of things like The Secret is they act like it's all about conscious intention, where your conscious mind has an agenda, your unconscious mind typically has multiple agendas, your spirit has an agenda, your soul has an agenda, your body has an agenda, you exist in a karmic field, and you have spiritual contracts, and those are some of the major things. So a lot of what I do with people is align the agendas of their spirit, their soul, their conscious mind, the different parts of their unconscious mind and their body, and clear karma and change spiritual contracts.
And that makes perfect sense. I put it took me years to get to this place of looking at it as where we focus our attention, intention, and interaction. That's what I found where it brings all of those elements that you're talking about together in the ways that work and that give you the opportunity of attending to those things at whatever level you're capable of.
Well, they work if the other things will line up with them.
Well, sure.
But if people have really strong unconscious programming or really limiting karma, spiritual contracts, they can temporarily change things, but it doesn't tend to last or fully succeed until you get everything lined up.
Now, speaking to that, do you experience this rubber band effect, right? The folks in a workshop or whatever, they have a moment where they're like totally connected and they know it, they feel it, they are it. And then a few moments later, it's like, what was that, right? That they disconnect from it. Is this, or even, you leave the door and the next day it's unavailable. Do you find that that is kind of a more normal than not in the process because of the subconscious things that perhaps they haven't addressed yet or aren't even aware of? Yes,
and again, it's the subconscious, but it's also your soul has an agenda, your spirit has an agenda, your body has an agenda, and there's karma, there's spiritual contracts. So it's all of those things. And
would you say that our ultimate agenda?
If you really shift something, it doesn't go back. I mean, people tend to get a high in a workshop, and they come down from that. But what gets healed and shifted doesn't. If you've done it, and if you have what we call whole being permission and alignment, well, if everything's lined up, it doesn't go back.
Right.
If it's not lined up, it can.
Now, do you consider our ultimate, the core of our being is simply desiring love and to be loved, or desiring to love and be loved?
Maybe. I mean,
well, connected, I guess, would be that, because to me, there seems to be an experience of awe in that place, coupled with the curiosity of what else is here, right?
Well,
does that make sense?
In order to answer the question, I have to explain a little bit about how I look at things.
Sure.
One of the things that makes energetic NLP different is I don't emphasize, I mean, of course there are concepts and ideas, but I make people take a pledge at the beginning that they're not going to believe anything I tell them, because I want them to connect with their own spirit.
Well, they got experience in order to actually believe anything, right? Don't take your.
Well, I'm saying more than that. I mean, that's one part of it, but I'm saying that what is my spiritual understanding at the moment may not fit for them. It may not be their path, and they might be ahead of me. They might be behind me. They might be just, laterally somewhere different. So I emphasize people connecting with experiences on a nonverbal level, because as soon as we put them in, so how this ties in, as soon as we say, well, everything's love, like in Course of Miracles, I mean, what does that even mean? And is it true or not true? I have no idea. But you could connect to
For me, that equates to energy. That love is just as energy is. Then we can qualify it however we choose.
Well, yeah, I mean, love is a portion of that energy. But to me, as soon as we say it's only about love, maybe not. I have, how would I know? What I do know is you can connect to your own divine purpose and let it guide you. And the less you put that into words, the more you're guided. Because as soon as you
I totally agree with that. And it fits with an ancient philosophy that the indigenous have been living by for millennia, the three brain system, the gut, the heart, and the head, and processing information and intake in that way. And now even physical science has demonstrated, medical science, if you will, that there's neurosensors in the gut, there's some in the heart, and of course we already know there is in the head. And in the processing of that, the sense that comes, is like we spoke earlier about, you can't think your way through a system built on vibration. You got to feel your way through it. This sense, this intuition then begins in the gut, and then moves up to the heart for, kind of a more of a Taoist kind of, is it desirable or undesirable? And then we go to the head and make choices as to what to do with it, rather than have some prescriptive notion that we're trying to shove down through our body and wonder why we feel diseased.
Well, a lot of the great mystics have talked about, and the idea that certain things are ineffable, that we can't, through our human framework, truly understand them. We can connect to it. We can use it. We can surf it, if you will. We can be part of it. And to me, and this is actually part of NLP too, that in NLP, they took from linguistics the idea of there's a deep structure, which is whatever reality is, and the surface structures we put into words, and it always diminishes it. So again, if you take something like love, like it was the Greeks that had 4 words for love, and it, to me, like say, and for other people, other approaches are great. And in energetic NLP, we really get out of like confining things in words.
Words combined. Absolutely. We categorize, we title, we label, we create boxes, we put it in it, and then we close the lid and wonder why nothing happens.
We stop thinking.
Right.
We stop thinking. That's what they're for.
Yeah.
And I think I always forget if it's Hinduism or Buddhism that has this not that philosophy, which means that there's certain things you can say what they're not, but we don't have a way to say what they are. We can
that's the ineffable, right? That's the energy we sense, the awe. How do you describe that sense of awe in any way, that's valid with words? It's a sense.
Yeah.
So in that sense, what's the next? You're on your way of describing some layers. Let's go to the next one.
The next layer
about your work and how you address particular things.
Oh yeah. So again, so to me, there's no, and you would probably agree with this. There's no such thing as the paranormal. These are all abilities we all have. They're just, it's not everybody's path. It's not everybody's interest, but everybody has the potential. And as you're talking about, people who've known for thousands and thousands of years, and I hear people go, "I don't believe in this energy stuff," and I go, "Do you ever pray for anybody who's not around you?" It's like, it's like the idea of things working at a distance. Like, well, prayer assumes you can, but so again, a lot of it is clearing the blocks. Again, the karmic, spiritual contracts, and unconscious, and also conscious limiting beliefs. And then a lot of it's aligning, again, this whole being permission alignment between the different aspects of ourselves. And the other part are empowerments, where the energy just helps you blossom the potential within you to do miracles, in a word.
And miracles do happen. Dreams do come true. I think we're both living examples of that. I've had, one that comes to mind is a 28-year dream come true. When I first started One World, my original show back in 1990, I wanted to emulate Bill Moyers and Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove as my interviewing style. I hoped that someday I would be worthy of an interview with one of them. 2018 rolls around, I get a phone call from Jeffrey on the voicemail of a website that I manage, and he says, "Hey, I think this interview I just did, your audience would like it. Would you take a look and see if you could help promote it?" And I was like, oh my gosh, here is an opportunity. Right. So I looked at the video, I wrote a blog, posted it, and then sent him the link to it, plus a PDF copy of my big book, which is called Stubbing My Toe on Purpose, a seminal view of consciousness, cosmology, and the congruence of science and spirituality. So 3 days later, I get an email back from him. "Hey, would you like to come talk about it?"
Fantastic.
So those kinds of things, if you're patient and persistent, have purpose, and you're fulfilling your passion and you persevere, things happen. I mean, that's just one. I've had dozens of things like that happen, as I'm sure you have too. When we have that kind of experience, it's much easier to acquiesce to something greater than if you've not had it yet.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
What do you say to those people who haven't had it yet? How do you open the door for them to have it in the work that you're doing?
Well, usually I start by going, open it first to little things. Just notice, and part of it, I should put a frame around it. I'll tell people, just start small if you want. Just try different things out, and that things that you want, and just notice what happens. And a lot of times, where people goof it up is they're doing the microscope view. They do, it doesn't immediately work the way they think it should. So I'll give a simple example of that. I was in this psychic development class in Marin County, north of San Francisco, and a bunch of us wanted to get coffee in San Francisco afterwards. So it was a really busy part of San Francisco, and everybody else has manifested a parking spot except for me. And I'm feeling like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I manifest? Everybody else has, I can't do it.
The parking gods weren't listening.
Yeah. Well, I was more blaming at the time, like, it must not be manifesting right, or, that kind of thing. Right. And finally get a parking spot, and I go, finally, I get out. And I ran into a friend of mine, people that you really like them, you don't deliberately get together with them, but when you see them, it's like, oh, wow. And it's somebody I hadn't seen for years. And if I had gotten the parking spot that I thought I should get, I wouldn't have run into him. So often with the synchronicities, you have to give it a little more time to see what happens, because they don't seem to be working, and then they do. So little small tangible things are often good ways for people to get the evidence they need, and then just build it up.
But they have to have the awareness to acknowledge that moment too, to really, recognize that it wasn't coincidence, that this event was crafted kind of like a cosmic conspiracy, if you will, just for them, in that, just like for you, it was created for you and for your friend to reunite for some reason, whatever that was. Your energies had to come together for a moment and ripple through the atmosphere without whatever results happened because of it. Those are fascinating moments, in my opinion.
Well, I'll give you a funny story when my groups, if they get too serious, sometimes I start singing children's songs like Old MacDonald, because I like doing Wank Wank here, and then they do way better when they're working with one another, because I won't let them be that serious, because when you're learning, psychic development and energy work, if you're serious about it, it's like being serious about dancing. You're moving like this, and when I get them to relax, they do great. So,
Well, isn't there an old adage, be ye as little children? I mean,
yes.
that kind of resonates everywhere. So how do we be like little children?
If I can just, so it's a running joke in the group,
All
and
right.
and Old MacDonald's the E-I-E-I-O is the chorus. So I'm walking with one of my students in London at night, and this woman's pushing what they would call a pram, what we call a baby carriage, and the baby's totally quiet. When he gets up next to me, all of a sudden we hear E-I-E-I-O, and it doesn't say anything else, and we're like, do we know you from past lives or what? It's like, but I mean, so one of the things I encourage people is if you start noticing these little delightful, I mean, what are the odds of that? And that was the only noise he made, and only when he was next to me. So it was like, okay, that's pretty random.
Yeah. How else could you explain the astronomical odds of that happening?
Exactly.
That not only brings you into that moment, but also ripples into the prior moments of the discussions of the activity with the song. Right.
And like mentioned, that Uber driver where
Right.
I'm teaching a workshop on spiritual alchemy, and he goes, oh, my grandmother said I should study spiritual alchemy. It's just like, that's pretty, it's like I should go play the lottery if my luck is that good.
Yeah, for some reason that hasn't worked for me yet, and maybe that's some subconscious programming that I have that feels like that ought to be the more natural way of creating that.
That one woman who keeps winning lottery or kept winning. I don't know if she's still alive. She won like 6 or so of them in Texas. I mean, a fair amount of money too. And she was a student of Silva mind control.
Well, obviously it can work, and I think when you, and I don't know if pure is the right word, but when the intention is clear of distractions, then that can actually manifest more easily because there's no push or pull with it, whether you're trying to get something or you're afraid of getting something, so you're pulling back. Those are, two unconscious habits that most of us have. And in these activities, from what you're saying and from my experience, it's flow. It's just being in the moment, totally present and aware and available, vulnerable, if you will. I think that's the new superpower, being vulnerable.
Well, my experience is like yours, and there's some people who teach, you have to really concentrate, but for me, it tends to work more like you say, it's just like really casual. I'm like, oh, this would be really good. And one of my teachers taught us to always add or better. And this is what I want.
Right. Yeah.
So that, your spirit can, come up with something.
I don't know what you've got planned for me, but I would like this or better, right? Because the universe, now here's the interesting thing that seems to be present is that there's always much more willingness to give us things. It's our willingness to receive them that gets in the way.
Exactly.
What's up with that? How do we overcome that kind of subconscious programming?
Well, we do a lot of work around that, and it can have different causes. So everything from I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. A lot of people have a lot of punishment energy in their space because punishment programming is so intertwined in our society that we don't even notice it. And I always like to use the example of Santa Claus. It's like, if you're a bad, jolly Saint Nick, but if you're a bad kid, not only do you not get a gift, but you get humiliated with a lump of coal.
Like the song, you got to be naughty, or you got to be, don't be naughty, be nice, or however that goes. It's been so long I've sang it, I don't remember. But those two things are in there, right? It's the good and the bad. And who was it that said nothing is good or bad? It's how we think it to be.
Well, and again, inherent in the Santa Claus thing, it's not just, it's the good and bad's one big part of it, but then there's the punishment aspect.
Mm.
So you don't get a gift and you get a lump of coal, just in case you thought it was a mistake. So I mean, it's
Well, if you need some heat, that lump of coal will come in fine.
if you're Tiny Tim, sir. And but the point I'm trying to make is people have, so either not worthy, not good enough, punishment, all kinds of past life stuff. Then there's the other sides of it that, like, I won't be able to handle success. I won't be, if I had money, then I could lose it. If I had love, I could lose it. You know, there's all kinds of beliefs. And in my work, rather than trying to figure it all out, you put your spirit and inner wisdom in charge and let them figure it out. And then we use energy to dissolve the old programming. And then people get a download from their spirit and their inner wisdom to replace that programming is the major thing we do.
So describe download a little more. Let's unpack that, because this is a word that many use in different ways. You know, I have a bunch of, extraterrestrial experiencers, contactees, whatever you want to call them, that use the term download when they're getting, massive bits of information that they've asked questions about, and suddenly they've got the intelligence or the awareness or understanding in order to get the next layer of that information that they can then decipher, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean something very much like that, very much like a computer download. And we tend to think of it more in terms of what the Akashic records. So people aren't familiar with that. The idea there's like the cosmic library where all experience is stored, and your spirit
like
can go
one mind.
Yeah, it's it's a way to visualize it and think about it like it's this big library with all the information. Is a metaphor, and your spirit can go there and get information and skills and abilities, but you can't take them. You can copy them, but you can't take. Well, I mean, you can take them, but that builds up all kinds of negative things. But you can copy anything you want.
So would this be more like embodying it instead of pretending?
Well, it's not.
So there's the whole, exactly, that's my point. That when you go there, as you're saying copy, I'm trying to find a common expression in this, that by bringing it into our being, then if that's a copy, then we embody that, we live in that place, we experience a new living awareness as a result.
Yeah, and that embodiment can take different forms. So that, like, sometimes it comes in as conscious information, sometimes it comes in as unconscious information or even programming, but useful programming. It can even come into your cells, your DNA, because along with the physical strands of DNA, there are energetic strands of DNA. A lot of people see that. I think people should say there's 16. I can't count them. I don't see them that clearly, but there's a bunch of them. So the downloads can be on that kind of physical level. It can be on a conscious level, unconscious level, and you are embodying it. You're incorporating it so that it, and then the intention can be that when it's useful, your inner wisdom, your spirit can draw upon it.
Very good. Thank you. I think that's valuable information, at least to have a framework from which to perceive something new that may not have been available prior to our conversation and our audience listening.
And downloads can also come from different kinds of beings, either that have bodies or never had bodies, or like I said, it could be aliens, could be, just high spiritual beings. There's a lot of possible sources. And what's important, though, for people is to have a clear intention that your spirit and your inner wisdom are only bringing in that which your spirit and your inner wisdom wants. Because just because you're downloading something doesn't mean it's not crap or something. It's the internet.
Right.
Just because you can download it.
That brings up an interesting term I heard not too long ago that a gentleman by the name of Matthias DeMott was talking about in his interview with Tucker Carlson. And has to do with empathic resonance.
Mhm.
And, kind of breaking that down, well, what would that feel like, right? So we know when we hear truth that it has a very deep empathic resonance in our entire being. So this kind of information, it would seem what is right for us amongst all that that download, if you will, has an empathic resonance. There's an unquestionable sense of its truth for us in that moment. Does that seem to be?
Well, yes, and it's important though to have a really clear intention that you're not just letting stuff in.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. The empathic resonance would let you know that that's the clearing. I'm
saying a step before that. A step before that where it just doesn't even come in.
Right.
The things that are not in resonance with me, I don't want them in my energy field.
Oh, yeah, and with practice that would occur, right?
Well, practice with a lot of its intention, and a lot of people when they're beginning to open up, they're just like, okay, I'm open. Give me information. And
right.
I was that way. Most people are, and just being able to be really clear with your spirit and inner wisdom that like there's a filter to it, and it's being vetted by your spirit, by your inner wisdom before it even comes in.
Right. And that is possible for us to do. And it, like you say, it's intention, it's that mind. I don't necessarily say mind. It's that deep intent to acquiesce to truth.
Yes, like when I'm teaching people to open up, intuitively, psychically, again, until they start doing this, nobody goes, oh, I got this information. And sometimes it's not accurate, not good, not necessarily evil or bad or anything, but just a lot of times you can get a lot of opinions, rather than actually, use.
Gooding on yourself is not good, right?
Yeah. Well, it's in the same way that, if you were talking to a stranger, you wouldn't just believe everything they tell you. Hopefully, you'd want some way to kind of test them and see how accurate they are.
So in that testing, what are some of the ways that one can do that? We were talking about the intuition, the gut feeling. How would that?
Well, again, I'm even putting that before that, is that imagining, there's a term in biology, a semi-permeable membrane.
Right.
It's what our cells have. I'm sure you know what it is, but if people don't, if our cells had an actual wall or barrier, they die. So they have to have a membrane that lets good stuff in.
Like a cheesecloth.
Yeah, and it lets in what, when it's working right, it lets in what's healthy for you, and it lets you release what's not healthy for you.
Yeah,
and
the inhale and exhale on a cellular level.
Yeah, and you can think of your aura as having a membrane around it that's a filter, and you put your spirit and your inner wisdom in charge and go, only let things in that are valuable for me, that are helpful for me. And you don't fight the other energies. It's more like a lightning rod. Other energies just either go around you or they just go down into the earth. So you don't fight them. You just either they go around you or they just go into the earth.
Sure.
Kind of like the Aikido. You're redirecting the energy. And then you still want to do the test you're talking about, like, can you feel that deep congruence, we would say in NLP land.
Now, are there a lot of folks that I know, myself included, have a high-pitched, I don't want to say tone, it's more like a sensation that they're aware of, especially when they're quiet. Is that something also that emerges with some of this depth of exploration?
Well, it certainly can. I have it. I mean, the stronger the energy gets, the more, and I do hear it personally.
The Hindus call it the shabda. They say it's the combination of all the life form energy on the planet, and it's a really high pitch.
What is it called?
Shabda, Shabda.
Oh, I'll look it up. That's great.
It's a
And,
cool term. Yeah. Well,
and when I'm doing energy work, it can get really loud, but I'm okay
yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. And sometimes it can be disconcerting. And yet it seems to be part and parcel of this higher frequency that we're seeking to attain.
Right.
It's like, what's seeking us, what we're seeking is also seeking us.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Thank you for giving me that name. I wasn't familiar with that. And
Well, I love it. I'm learning from you. You learn from me. This is really
oh yeah.
what reciprocal relationships are about, right? That we give and take. This is that we share each other and we learn from each other, and we find, or I find, that there's so much of a resistance to this flow of conversation. It's more like, well, I want to share what I know and convince you that what I know is true, instead of the questions and exploring and, okay, what I think I heard you say was this according to my terminology, and does that make sense, and all that kind of stuff. Active listening, right, is what it is in the terms we use today. And yet this communication, this openness, this willingness to be vulnerable and share seems to be a real stretch for most of us. In your work, do you find that capacity for others is, let's say, exponentiated in the effort and practice over time?
Yes, actually, it's one of the things I really stress. As I mentioned before, I make people take a pledge they're not going to believe anything I tell them. So I set the frame, and I'll put up signs like, this is a no truth zone. I go, tell us what you're observing, tell us what you get, what you make of it, but don't do it from a place of spiritual arrogance, like this is the truth.
Right.
You just go, this is how I think of it, this is what I'm perceiving, this is what I think. What do you think? It's like,
exactly. You're thinking, it's like, don't believe anything I say. This was an old friend, Willie Whitefeather, brought that up to me. It was one of my first interviews on my previous show, and he says, don't believe a thing I say.
Oh, that's great. I like him already.
Yeah, he was wonderful. He's not with us anymore. However, he is on my dead council.
Mm.
And those things are available too.
They'll laugh when I make them take the pledge, and I'll go, but I'm serious about it. I'm telling you what I think. And I go, 10 years from now, if I was saying exactly the same things, that would be depressing. This is what I know, what I think at this point in time. And
and this is,
I know it helps people, but that doesn't mean it's the ultimate truth. They're useful ideas.
We're always growing. We're always expanding. We can never reach that state of perfection that we seek. And yet the perfection is in the journey toward it, right? To recognize all of the synchronicities and the serendipitous moments and to take advantage of them. Life is very opportunistic when you allow it to be. Mm-hmm. So, oh gosh, I had a question and I lost it in our tangentialism. So in this process of becoming, what kind of everyday or simple activities or something that our audience can try on for themselves that would give them a hint of what else is available?
A really, really simple process. And so one of the ways to access the powers of our unconscious mind and the powers of our spirit is to use symbols, metaphors. The unconscious mind, the spirit, understands that. That's why our dreams are so symbolic and metaphorical. And if nothing else, if people cleared their energy a couple of times a day and then filled up with their authentic energy, it's life-changing. And a really, really simple way to do that is you just imagine out in front of you is an energy magnet. You put your spirit in charge and ask it to send energies in your energy field that aren't yours and aren't helpful to the magnet. Now, notice I'm not saying negative energies or bad, in energetic
That's
NLP,
a
we
form
go,
of programming too.
yes, it is. Yes. Yeah. And the thing is, as soon as you label it as negative, you get into resistance to it, and what we resist persists. So we just go, it's either your energy or it's not. If it's not your energy, it's helpful or it's not. And you don't have to consciously figure it out because your spirit can. And
You're going to feel it too, right?
yeah, I even encourage people to bypass that because then again, they start analyzing it. Your spirit knows what energies in your energy field aren't good for you. You don't have to consciously micromanage your spirit. So, the way I encourage people to do it is you put a magnet in front of you, you put your spirit in charge and go, any energies that are in my energy field that aren't mine and aren't helpful. And then there's another type of energies that were mine, but they don't belong in present time. So like old painful emotions and stuff.
Well, the reason I bring up feeling, and I totally agree with what you're saying, the way I'm using feeling is that everything has a frequency.
Yeah.
And in that information exchange, the clearer or more precise it is for you, that frequency is going to be a more distinct feeling that you have with it.
Well, that's a very powerful way to do it. And I'm suggesting the opposite, which is where you don't try to figure it out even on a feeling
I'm not
level.
saying it's figuring it out. It's innate. It's just it's like this knowing beyond, what's the old phrase, the peace that surpasseth understanding, right? When you have that frequency present, there's no need for anything else. You just know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I totally agree with that. And what I'm suggesting is getting out of the knowing business for this process. We're just going, my spirit's in charge. It's not about me knowing or not knowing. I don't even need to make it that complicated. My spirit can identify the energy and send it out to the magnet. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And and I find that the more people just let their spirit take over, the easier it is for this process. Other processes are different.
Sure. And I really like your process of being able to move beyond all of that and just simply allow.
So the rest of the process, so you do that, and then, and again, so it's energies that aren't yours and aren't helpful, energies that were yours but don't belong in present time, and they're not all going to come off. Just whatever comes off easily. You drop the magnet in the earth and just let the earth recycle the energies. Then you do 3 more magnets, one above you that clears from your shoulders, and they clear in your body, but around your whole energy field. And you want that one at least 9 feet, 3 meters above your head. So it gets your whole aura. That goes in the earth, one behind you, because a lot of energies literally hide behind our backs. And so there's often a ton of energy there. And then the last magnet is in the earth. It clears from the base of the spine through the legs, feet, going down at least 1 meter, 3 feet, and all around you. So you do those 4, and you set it be real easy. Then you ask your spirit to fill you up with more of your authentic essence and with energies that will support you in whatever you're up to.
Mm-hmm.
And what I suggest to people, do that when you first get up, do it before you go to bed. If you have a meeting or something that you're going to go to, do it before you go. If you work with clients or you're around people that are emotional, after you see them, do it. Particularly, again, for anybody who sees clients, really important to use those magnets afterwards and clear their energy out of your space, retrieve your energy back from them. And if you do it in the morning, it's like, I used to wake up like, kind of person. And when I would just lie in bed and do my magnets real quick, it'd be like, oh, world. And if you do it before you go to bed, you sleep better, you get more rest, you typically fall asleep better, not always, but typically. And so that little magnet process, and then super important to fill up. And people often ask me, well, how do I know what my true essence is? Again, your spirit knows what your true essence is, and it knows what to fill you up with. And when you're filling up, thinking the energy is going in the cells, the DNA, the organs, the body systems, all the chakras. And of course, as you know, there's a lot more than 7. So it's going in all the chakras, going in your energy channels and all the layers of your energy field. But you just let it be real easy and just let your spirit be in charge.
Fascinating process.
Okay.
And I would encourage all of you viewers to try it on for yourself, see if it works. Does great. If it doesn't, there's something more for you that you'll find.
Exactly.
It's the notion that you're seeking that you will eventually find, and you continue as a seeker of wisdom and truth.
Well said.
Yeah.
Really well said.
Art, this has been just fantastic. I've enjoyed it. We've had a lot of wonderful exchanges. I truly appreciate the depth of your knowledge and wisdom and how you've been able to share that with our audience. And I know that they'll be appreciative. At least some will. Right?
Well, thanks. And I so appreciate, the work for people who don't put on podcasts like this. It's a lot of work. And I think, you're one of the people really helping to shift human consciousness. So what you're doing is really important, and I'm thrilled to contribute to it.
It's a true joy for me, and the benefits I cannot begin to express of it. And thank you for acknowledging that, Art. I'm honored and humbled. And on that note, namaste and in la catch. Thank you for tuning into this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I will see you next time.